Hello, this is Kurt Young, Senior Technical Marketing Engineer, and welcome to Learn at Kemp, a series of videos to educate you on Kemp technologies, load balancing, and application delivery in general. This is Technical Module 3. In this module, we'll discuss some more advanced configuration settings on the Kemp Loadmaster, some best practices around Kemp Loadmaster, and troubleshooting tools and some pointers should issues arise. It's always about the traffic and how traffic is routed throughout the environment. We discussed transparency in Technical Module 1 and how traffic must always route back through the Loadmaster. We will discuss the one exception to this rule, which is DSR, or Direct Server Return. Aside from DSR, we have two examples highlighted here, which talk about transparency and when it just won't work. Clients on the same subnet as the real servers, and real servers not configured to use a Loadmaster as a gateway. Here's a detail of the transparent routing that we're talking about. How does the Loadmaster impact the response? If it is transparent, then all flows must go back to the Loadmaster, or use non-transparency to fix these issues. Here in Step 1, we see the client IP address of 192.168.1.2 and the destination of 192.168.1.50, which is the Loadmaster virtual IP. Then, in Step 2, since transparency is on, the Loadmaster will send back the original client IP of 192.168.1.2 to the real server at 192.168.1.200. Step 3, the real server will send traffic directly back to the client at 192.168.1.2. The client doesn't know what to do with this traffic since it never started a conversation with IP address 192.168.1.200 in the first place. This is where Direct Server Return, or DSR, comes into play. In this scenario, the real server is configured to trick the client into thinking the communication is coming back from the Loadmaster. This is used when response bandwidth is really large, like video, or when transparency is needed when the real server cannot be configured to use a Loadmaster as the gateway. The Loadmaster advertises its MAC and IP address pair as it's supposed to. The client will send the traffic to the Loadmaster first. Traffic is forwarded to the real servers with the original source IP and destination IP address. The real servers have a loopback NIC configured with the Loadmaster virtual service IP address. Real server accepts the traffic and answers the client directly using the virtual server IP address configured on the loopback rather than the real IP address of the server. Needless to say, DSR should be avoided if possible, since OS level changes are required on each real server. Troubleshooting may be tricky should a problem arise. Okay, moving on. In some cases, the virtual services can be on various NICs. This will often require setting a default gateway on the virtual service itself. Interface bonding can use multiple interfaces, aggregation of bandwidth, and also part of an HA proposition. If LACP is used, then the switch needs to be configured according to the manufacturer's specifications for 802.3 AD. Use VLAN setup to allow Loadmaster to have more interfaces, presenting services to clients in different subnets, and also limit the number of physical interfaces in use. Working with bonding in VLANs, always perform bonding of interfaces first, then create VLANs. Bonding ETH0 and ETH1 can lead to serious issues and is not allowed to occur. These interfaces, however, can be bonded with other interfaces. If bonding ETH0, move the WUI access interface to another interface. Typically, real servers will be in IP subnets local to the Loadmaster. Non-local real servers can be specified where there are real servers which are routed. The LoadMaster can be configured to route traffic to a server that does not reside within the networks configured on the Kemp device. Static routes may be required in order to reach these servers. This is a useful feature when deploying Kemp devices in networks and subnets where the servers may reside in different sites or subnets. You must disable transparency for any VS that uses non-local real servers. Disabling a real server can be done per virtual service or globally. This will prevent any new connections to the real server. Disabling a server will allow for routine or unplanned maintenance. Drain time will apply and introduce any new requests to alternate servers. Meanwhile, the existing and persistent entries are honored. Choose a long enough drain time for users so they may be able to save or complete any work. Server NAT is outbound. The Kemp device will NAT the connection according to the global or specific server NAT setting. Connections from the real server will appear to come from the LoadMaster. If globally set, the connection will leave with an associated IP address of the LoadMaster interface. If set on a virtual service, it will be sent out with the IP address of the virtual service. Some things to be aware of. For one, server NAT is on by default. In situations where the connection is made directly to the real server bypassing the LoadMaster, the response back to the client does go through the LoadMaster and gets NATed. This connection will fail since the client is receiving a response from a different IP address. All LoadMasters support content switching. Content switching rules are built using regex or regular expression. With Layer 7 support, the LoadMaster can direct requests to servers, or groups of servers, based on URL or headers. Content rules can be leveraged in combination with Edge Security Pack to route traffic based on group membership. This allows the administrator much greater flexibility in designing their solution to support more advanced applications. In addition to content switching rules, other rules can be configured, for instance, to change header fields should the application require that. The ability to do header modification or URL rewriting, adding something to the header, removing something from the header, or doing a replace. Modifications to the body can also be accomplished with content rules on the Kemp LoadMaster. Non-transparent services are limited to the number of source ports per IP address. Alternate source addresses can be used when scaling beyond 64,000 connections. Some applications require more ports. This can be done easily by adding additional addresses per virtual service. Just a note, we've already discussed transparency, subnet originating requests, and now 64K connection scaling. Any of these could impact the source IP address seen on the inbound connections to the real servers. When it comes to setting up Kemp LoadMaster to publish workloads, there are some best practices that should be followed. When setting up virtual services, reconsider using transparency if the real server doesn't need to see the original source IP address of the client. Use subnet originating requests so that the LoadMaster will send the real server the IP address of the server-side interface rather than the virtual service IP. And always use the most sophisticated health checking to ensure that the application is up and running. When setting up persistence, ensure that you've set the proper timeout settings in relation to the workload being published. In regards to global settings on the LoadMaster, turn server NAT off unless this is needed. Set up an external syslog server and configure the LoadMaster to send syslogs to it. This will help during troubleshooting as well. Increase the drain stop time to ensure users have sufficient time to finish tasks. And select drop connections on real server failure checkbox. This is useful for workloads such as Exchange. There are several tools available to help troubleshoot issues as they arise. A TCP trace can be performed on any interface or multiple interfaces. These captures can be opened and analyzed in applications such as Wireshark. There are also several log files on the Kemp LoadMaster, including Layer 7 debug traces. Some more on troubleshooting when trying to resolve publishing issues. Always confirm the virtual services are responding to a telnet on the configured port. Default gateways on the server should be the LoadMaster when transparency is turned on. Look at routing issues due to non-local real servers being used in publishing an application. VLAN assignment and DNS related issues. Kemp support is always available to help customers resolve any type of issues that may come up in the application delivery environment. This concludes Technical Module 3.